As you know, we have, for the last 3 terms, we've held some declamation competitions to try to find the best speakers from each hall, from the sophomore, junior, and senior classes. And today, the 3 winners from each of those competitions are going to go head-to-head in a final championship round. Now, the winners of today's competition will receive some very coveted hall points. And I hear that the hall competition is very close and possibly hinges on who wins today. So this is an important competition here. But in addition to the hall points, the winners also will receive some gift cards. So the 3rd place winner will receive a $50 gift card, 2nd place $100, and 1st place $200. Ooh. Yes, and the winners will be selected by a faculty panel, including me, Dr. Christopher Schlecht, and Dr. Daniel Newman. Speakers will get 5.5 minutes, and they'll get a 1-minute warning. So Jade will be our timekeeper. She'll give you a hand at 4.5, and so that's your sign that you got 1 more minute left. Now, the first speaker, in order to give him an opportunity to engage with previous speakers, he can split his time, and he's chosen to do that. So he'll speak for part of his time in the beginning here, and then after everybody has spoken, he'll come back up and use the rest of his time to give closing arguments. Now, in the last 3 terms, we've done a thesis exercise. This is a traditional progymnasma, one of these preliminary exercises that were popular in ancient Greece and Rome. And here at NSA, we tend to use the word declamation loosely. Just refers to any rhetorical exercise. But declamation is actually one specific kind of rhetorical exercise, which we haven't done so far this year. The thesis is not technically declamation, but today, for the championship, what better way to close things off than with a true declamation? Now, there are 2 kinds of declamation, and we're going to be doing what the ancients considered the easier of the 2, but it's not easy, it's difficult. This type of declamation is called suasoria, and it is a deliberative speech giving advice to a historical or fictitious figure on the verge of an important decision. And in this case, our speakers will be senators advising a group of fellow senators, which is you all, on an important decision. Now, this means that not only do our speakers have to do some role-playing here, you all have to do some role-playing, all right? So let me read for you the proposal here, the scenario that is before us, this legislative body. We are citizens of the proud nation of Meltovia. We love our land and our heritage. Our land is bordered on the east by a majestic mountain range, and a great river flows along our shore to the west. We honor our nation's history by flying our flag and singing our anthem. And we observe a memorial festival every year to commemorate our nation's founding. One of our national treasures is an ancient citadel where our forefathers fought and won our independence. They erected the citadel on a rocky promontory over the river at a place where the river narrowed and where our ancient enemies to the west, the Turabians, used to cross over and menace our people. Those pesky Turabians here. These invasions ended when our forefathers erected the citadel and bravely fought off our enemies. That was ages ago, and the passage of time has reduced the citadel to ruins. Yet enough of it remains to allow any visitor to reconstruct in their imagination what had taken place there. It is now a hallowed site where we bring our children to retrace the contours of battle and to remember how our forefathers spilled their blood to win our independence. Their sacrifice inaugurated the prosperous way of life that we still enjoy today. In more recent times, our people came to befriend the Turabians, as happens here, right? The enemy Turabian becomes our friends. They have proven to be loyal allies in conflict and honest partners in trade. When the river is calm, we run ferries between our land and theirs, and both nations benefit from these commercial exchanges. For most of the year, however, the river is too rough for ferry traffic. So recently, a team of civil engineers drew up plans for a bridge that would span the river. The bridge would facilitate year-round trade with our friends to the west and could stimulate so much commerce and industry that we might become the most prosperous nation in the world. Unfortunately, the design calls for a bridge footing to be located at the very place where the ruins of the old citadel now stand. Engineers are certain that this is the only possible way to build a stable bridge over the river. Our politicians debate the matter. Should we build the bridge? That's the question before you. So half of our speakers today will argue yes, build the bridge and destroy the citadel. The others will say no, abandon the bridge project and preserve the old citadel. So before we ask our speakers to come up and argue, I want to take a preliminary vote to see where you all stand now. If you want to build the bridge, fellow Maltovians, please raise your hand right now. All right. All right, if you don't want to build the bridge and preserve the citadel, ooh, this is gonna be good. We're about half and half. All right, so remember what you voted for. I'm gonna ask you to vote again at the end and we'll see if our speakers changed your mind. So now, because we have more speakers than usual, the judges will not offer comments in between. We're just gonna go straight through. It'll be just like a Senate floor debate, like you might see in the US Senate. And so I'm going to announce all of our speakers now. I won't announce them one at a time later. So these are our 9 speakers for today, and this is the order they'll be speaking in. Jake Hughes, Dulcinea Stutzman, Kayla Erb, Maggie Paul, Sydney Bennett, Luke Sisadny, Maggie Elmore, Caleb Kreft, and Lucy Good. And without further ado, I will invite our first senator, Mr. Jake Hughes.
Members of the Maltovian Senate, the decision before us today fundamentally revolves around arguments of historical significance, economic prosperity, and our moral dignity as a nation. We find ourselves today in a question of what would bring about the greater good of Maltovia and what actions that we should take that does not decrease the honor that we earned when our forefathers fought for our independence, but rather aims toward a multiplication in both our national self-regard and our overall prosperity. And what you will come to see as we lay out our case is that proceeding with the proposed bridge project will ultimately accomplish those goals. And not proceeding with the proposed bridge project will end up causing more harm than good. So why is that? Well, let us first take into consideration the current state of our relationship with the Turabians. As you know, you can open any Maltovian history book, and it will be able to tell you that our relationships with the Turabian people have not always been that of positive sentiment. In fact, our very own citadel that is at stake today was erected for the purpose of symbolizing the aftermath of those conflicts. That citadel was built because we as a culture wanted to remember what measures we had to take to deal with the violence and the indecency of the Turabian people at the time to gain our independence. Our history with the Turabians was truly unfortunate. But since then, that history has changed. If you were to explain that previous history to any young student learning about the history between Maltovia and Turabia, they might be a little taken aback because they wouldn't be able to imagine a world in which the Turabians were not our closest allies. A majority of our most valuable trades take place with the Turabians. Many of our international conflicts are backed up and reinforced by the Turabians. And the majority of our nation's modern success can be traced back to the help of the Turabians. Now take a moment and think about what the citadel truly symbolizes to the Maltovian people. And better yet, to take it a step further, think about what the new bridge project will symbolize for the Maltovian people. The citadel does not exhibit the profitability of our commercial exchange with the Turabians, but the bridge will. The citadel does not depict our thriving and faithful alliance with the Turabians, but the bridge will. The The citadel has never taken us in the direction of being one of the most renowned and successful nations in the world, but the bridge will. All of our engineers, economists, and politicians agree. Members of the Maltovian Senate, we ask that you keep in mind the importance of proceeding with the proposed bridge project, because our economic prosperity and our national dignity depends upon it. Thank you.
Senators of Maltovia, today we are free, prosperous, and powerful. We have been blessed as a leading nation, trading with our allies by water, enjoying many luxuries, and accomplishing many great things. But this was not always the case. Day and night, the land listened to our cries, and our enemies mocked and terrorized us. They slaughtered mothers and children, burned our developments, and menaced our people. In the midst of this dark time, our forefathers left their wives and children to fight for this land and to fight for our home until finally they built the citadel, claiming our independence for the first time. On those very rocks, which Jake would ask you to demolish, those rocks stained by blood and tears, we became the people of Maltovia. My fellow senators, I stand before you today with a heavy heart, urging you to abandon this bridge project and to preserve our sacred citadel, for there would be much more lost than gained if this project was pursued. Winston Churchill wisely said, "We shape our buildings, thereafter they shape us." For centuries, this citadel has taught us, our parents, and our grandparents our history. I, like many of you, grew up exploring those grounds, the nooks and crannies where our men defended, killed, and were killed. By continuing to do so, we honor the lives and the legacy of those men who fought bravely to give us our home. But more than just honoring them, the landmark also connects us to those men and their sacrifice. It conforms us to the vision of our forefathers and reminds us of God's faithfulness to his people. Maltovians have left this citadel since its founding to continually shape our people because the grounds themselves proclaim Maltovia's history in a way that no museum or textbook ever could. The fact that our nation possesses multiple treasures from throughout the centuries does not in any way detract from this one. If a mother were to be asked which child to give up, the eldest or youngest, we would laugh and say that is preposterous, for every child is a unique gift from God. Though we are not talking about children, each memorial is worthy of consideration for itself because each one marks a specific time in our nation's history. This landmark uniquely narrates how we came to be the nation that we are today, and it must be revered as such. Why would we tear it down when there is no need whatsoever? Why would we willingly destroy this monument for nothing more than blind ambition? Jake said we cannot imagine a world where we were enemies with the Turabians, but by keeping it, how much more will we remind our people of the blessing that we have a great relationship with our neighbors now? Let no one think that I am against progress or furthering our relationship at all. Rather, I acknowledge that this could increase our trade. I refuse to accept, however, that this is the only way to move forward. I refuse to believe that our nation would willingly choose to destroy the legacy of our forefathers for more wealth when we have already been so abundantly blessed. Remember that we are not debating whether to tear down any old ancient building, nor is our national security at risk whatsoever. If we are set on increasing our trading window, let us consider building a dam further upstream or working to develop the technology. With our abundant resources and technology, as well as our brilliant engineers, we will certainly find another way. I'd like you to consider the irreversibility of this decision. If you vote to build this bridge right now, you will instantly lose an ancient piece of our history and what it represents to our nation. I entreat you to remember the proverb, "Make haste slowly." Prosperous nations that grow discontent, taking on unnecessary projects often do themselves more harm than good. Look no further than Athens, a people much like ourselves, who, ignoring Pericles' advice, grasped for more and lost their nation. If we pursue this unnecessary project, we may become wealthier. Our relationship with our neighbors may be better, but it will certainly be at the loss of something greater, the nation that our forefathers built, a nation built by trusting the Lord and remembering his faithfulness. How tragic would it be if our people forgot who has made us the prosperous people that we are today? Let us remember Proverbs 22:28, which states, "Remove not the ancient landmark which thy fathers have set." Let us be a generation that adds on to our national heritage rather than a people who look to replace it. Thank you.
Friends, Meltovians, countrymen, lend me your ears. We are proud citizens of Meltovia. We love our land and we honor our heritage, and thus our citadel is a place of great significance. This site marks the place where our founding fathers fought for Meltovia's independence. When we pass by the ruins, we remember their sacrifice and are provoked to gratitude for the freedom that Meltovia enjoys today. Our citadel is a place of great significance. And so I do not take this conversation lightly. I understand your hesitancy to destroy the citadel. In fact, I greatly respect your eagerness to preserve it. You fear that we will forget our past and dishonor our heritage. Rightly so. I too believe that we must remember the legacy that our forefathers left to us. But it is for this very reason that I believe we must build the bridge. In doing so, we continue the fight for Meltovia and her prosperity and preserve the very spirit of the citadel. I ask you, why did our forefathers build the citadel? Persecuted by the Turabians' invasions, they sought a means to protect Meltovia. They saw the strategic advantage of this spot on the river where the banks between our nations narrow, and they capitalized on it. Their efforts successfully ended enemy attacks and preserved Meltovia's prosperity. And why ought we to build this bridge? Hindered by the ferocity of the river, we seek a means to protect Meltovian commerce and trade year-round. We know the strategic advantage of this spot on the river, the only spot where this bridge can be built, and we must capitalize on it. This construction will defeat the constraints of our circumstances and preserve Meltovia's prosperity. You see, building this bridge carries on the legacy that our forefathers initiated. They fought so that we could be free to grow as a nation. They sacrificed their resources so that we could expand ours. And if we safeguard the citadel, we terminate their entire mission by obstructing Meltovia's warfare. Do not nullify their achievement for the sake of remembering it. However, I acknowledge that some of the citadel inspires the very spirit that I am advocating for, as Dulcie brought up. She elaborated on the deeply meaningful experience that we can have by visiting these ruins. These buildings, she said, shape us, they teach us our history. And I would agree, if we build this bridge, some aspects of the citadel will be lost. But I ask you, Dulcie, my opponents, where do you draw the line? If we cannot touch these rocks for this reason, then what will change your mind? Does it take an invasion from the Turabians because we didn't preserve our commerce with them? Does it take a hurricane that threatens the very existence of these ruins? No, the significance of this citadel lies in the fact that we remember it that way. And we have no alternative way to build this bridge that guarantees Meltovia's prosperity. If we do not build this bridge, we are chained to the whims of the river. We are unable to pursue our own prosperity 9 out of 12 months of the year. But we do have alternative ways to remember. We can move these ruins to a nearby location or to a museum where they're preserved from the elements. We can name the bridge after our forefathers. We can erect signage around it that explains its significance. We can even host memorials on the bridge that remember the past and present achievements of Maltovia. Do not make the mistake of believing that the significance of these rocks lies within the very rocks. The reason that this particular collection of minerals has meaning in the first place is because of what it stands for. And thus it is more important that we honor what they stand for, that we adopt our forefathers' resolve. And their resolve was to consider the well-being of Maltovia before their own. My opponents have and will continue to come up here and pull at your heartstrings. They will tell you of the glorious battles fought on this site. They will ask you how you could tear down what was built to secure our independence, and they will tell you that to destroy is to dishonor. But they are mistaken. If we do not destroy the citadel, we rather destroy everything that our forefathers utilized the citadel to fight for. If we stop building structures that preserve our country's independence and security, we tear down something far greater than ruins. We abandon our liberty for sentiment's sake, and that is something that our forefathers would certainly have detested. They would have been the first to take a sledge to this citadel if it would fortify our nation's existence. So continue the fight for Maltovia. Build the bridge. Build the new citadel. Thank you.
Our flag is more than just cloth and ink. It is a universally recognized symbol that stands for liberty and freedom. It is the history of our nation, and it is marked by the blood of those who died defending it. These words by Senator John Thune, although he is speaking of the flag of his country, apply to the very fortress that we are discussing today, the citadel of Maltovia. This fortress represents our independence, independence only won by the blood of our forefathers who courageously fought off our enemies. And how did they do this? They built that strong citadel from which they could battle. This citadel has stood for centuries, and though it has aged with time, continues to represent the sacrifice that was made on our behalf. Now, my opponents so far have agreed with this argument. They agree that the citadel is important and it represents our independence as a nation. However, where they disagree is that the benefit of building a bridge for trading purposes is not worth the citadel's destruction, even if it symbolizes our new relationship with the Turabians, as Jake pointed out. I agree with many of the claims that Kayla mentioned. Yes, trading is paramount. Yes, the amount of commerce and industry that we could stimulate would possibly make us into the most prosperous nation in the world. And yes, it seems that the only stable location is the spot where our citadel currently stands. However, the reason we need a bridge in the first place is unproven. Kayla said that building a bridge is the only alternative, and I would disagree. It is said that the river is too rough for ferry traffic year-round. I suggest that the problem is not merely due to the rough river or turbulent weather, but rather because our ferries are outdated and have been increasingly declining in quality for decades. We have used these ferries for over 60 years, and they clearly cannot handle any choppy conditions. Therefore, I propose the following solution. Instead of demolishing one of our nation's most valued treasures, our beacon of liberty, that we recondition our old ferries to include the modern features that are able to endure any weather complications. In doing so, we can trade with our allies year-round, thus stimulating more commerce and industry than we ever have before, while at the same time preserving our historical citadel and honoring our forefathers. In their suggestion to build the bridge, what my opponents are valuing most is that of national prosperity, as Jake pointed out. Although this is an honorable goal in and of itself, they consequently throw away the values of historical preservation and the education of future generations. I'd like you to think back on a specific historical location that you distinctly remember. This location could be a memorial stone, the home of a martyr, or even a battlefield. It is true that you learn about these places through reading them in books, and this is often very helpful. But once you're there, once you're standing in the exact spot and you see it, it is then that you really remember it. Do we not want this opportunity for our children to see and remember that exact place where our ancestors fought for us? Franklin Roosevelt once said that those who have long enjoyed such privileges as we enjoy forget in time that men have died to win them. Senators, let us not forget those men. Thank you.
Senators of Maltovia, I bought this dress in Poland. Now, there's nothing distinctly about this dress that makes you know that you bought it from Poland, and my plan was to buy something distinctly Polish. So I went all around my little town of Gorzów to all the little Polish shops selling their little handmade clothing items with vendors that negotiated only in Polish. And I thought, if there's anywhere to buy clothes that show that I've been to Poland, it's here. But I was so wrong. Because do you know what those Polish clothes said? New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Here I was as an American wanting to show my friends that I had been to Poland, and all of the Polish people were wanting to tell their friends that they had been to America. Now, this did seem a little deceitful to me. After all, it's sort of like going to California and buying a t-shirt that says Berlin. Essentially, what you're saying is it's telling the world that this shirt has value because it represents my history, when the truth is the value of your history is in something else. I want to propose to you that my opponents are holding on to the citadel because they are confusing the value of something that represents a history with the value of our history itself. And you need to ask yourself, as my fellow senators, does this citadel truly hold the value of our history, of our patriotism, or is the negative team holding it out to you like a Polish t-shirt? As Kayla mentioned, the affirmative team agrees with everything that my opponents have said about the importance of preserving history and patriotism of our beautiful country. But Dr. Schlecht, what the negative team does not understand is that they are failing to uphold their own values. In fact, the affirmative team are the ones that will best uphold the values of history and honor that in our country. Dulcie has reminded us of a very significant historical moment where our forefathers fought and bled and died at the citadel. But let's dig in a little closer to what the purpose of this historical moment was. As has been said many times, the citadel marks the place where our forefathers fought off our enemies at that time, the Turabians. But what was the purpose of this battle? If any of you have taken the great Senator Dr. McIntosh's political economics class, you will know that this is not a question that can be answered with a multiple choice questionnaire, although none of Dr. Mack's students would be able to test that theory. But what we can know is that most political philosophers agree is that the purpose of a good battle comes down to two pairs of principles: safety and defense, and peace and justice. We know that our forefathers were fighting a good battle. They were fighting to defend our citizens and to bring peace and justice back to our country, and they succeeded. Now we do have safety, we do have peace with the Turabians. That is what our forefathers fought and died for. The negative team has performed a sleight of hand. They have said the value of our history lies in the citadel, but like a Polish t-shirt, that is not the value of our history. The value of our history is not in what the citadel is, it's what it stands for. Maggie and Dulcie tried to make you believe that the only way to honor our history is to protect the stones our fathers died on, not the peace they were fighting for. Nothing could be further than the truth. And as Kayla mentioned, nothing could be further from what our forefathers wanted. Imagine that you and your family were slaves. You work every day in shackles. One day your wife and your children are beaten before your eyes, and you decide that you are going to rise up and protect your family. And you do. You fight hard, and you bleed out on the battlefield. But before you die, you know that your family is safe. Your family is free. Now imagine that your son stands up, picks the shackles off the ground, and puts them again on his wrist and the wrist of his mother and his siblings. And he says, the only way to remember the sacrifice our father has made is to keep these shackles on our wrists where they have always been. Now I know the negative team will try to come up here and convince you that this citadel is not a shackle, but that is exactly what they are trying to make it. They are addressing the issue of the citadel with a slavery mindset, a mindset that would rather shackle us to the past than honor it. Now I want to pause that thought for a moment and turn to the idea of progress. Progress has been thrown around in this debate, and it's a bit of a loaded term. In fact, Dulcie, my opponent, is the first one who introduced it. And you may find this hard to believe, but some circles actually see the term progressive as a dirty word. But actually, the word progress comes from the Latin, and I ran this by Mr. Griffith. It comes from the Latin words pro gradi, or to walk toward, or as some prefer it, to roll toward. The affirmative team is not raising progress up on a pedestal. Time is walking on. We are walking towards something. At some point, this citadel was progress. Progress is inevitable. The really important issue here is, what are we progressing toward? Thank you.
Okay, I would like to start out my speech addressing some remarks made by the other team. First off, Jake brought up the fact that the Citadel does not depict our new prosperous nation. I'm not really confused, or I am a little bit confused about what he means by that, because it built our new and prosperous nation that we have today. I don't know how it can't have depicted it. In the effort to preserve it, Kayla asks, where do we stop? Where do we stop? I say precisely where our new Maltovia started. That's when we know we need to stop. That's when we know we need to stop. And I might ask the same question to both Kayla and Sydney. Sydney says, we are confusing where value lies. Well, where do we stop? Shall we rend Maltovian flags into bathrobes in the name of gain? Shall we grind gravestones into road gravel? Those are all things that have their own gain. I also fail to understand how anyone is shackled to the past. Are the Jews shackled to the past by their Holocaust memorials? Were the Israelites shackled to the past by the 12 stones that they removed for the Jordan River? The proposal before us is, at its core, dishonorable. We cannot repay our fathers and mothers. We cannot repay those who gave their very lives for our freedom and prosperity, and it's clear that we cannot give them anything in return. They have lived for Maltovia, and they have died for Maltovia. All that is left for us is to honor their name and give our due respect to them, to continue their vision and leave a heritage for our children. Fellow Maltovians, demolishing one of the remnants of their memory is not the path of humble gratitude. Shall our citadel endure the endless battery and besieging of our old enemies only to be sapped by our own hands? Let us honor this glorious monument whose memory makes us tremble, that chills us and makes us ask, what was it that empowered our fathers to trade life for death on the cold, rocky promontory? What inspired their wives to trade a diligent domestic peace for the restless dread of war? What inspired their children to trade a quiet and sacred childhood for cold steel? What causes anyone to risk their life? It was us that they looked to. For nothing but the glory of a future vision can prompt anyone to give his present life. So let's give the minuscule acknowledgement of citadel festivals and anthems those very pennies of our appreciation. Maltovians, how can we remove the very gravestone of our defenders? A headstone not engraved with human hands, but with cannon and with musket. A gravestone that is not only a gravestone of their death, but a cornerstone of our life. For it marks not only the end of our subjugation, but the beginning of a new and prosperous Maltovia. All of our freedoms and prosperity have been built on the battle of that citadel. Maltovians, it is dishonorable and shameful to even consider removing this precious memorial of their bravery and freedom, our values and our identity. And not only is it dishonorable, but it is damaging, because memorials are signposts from the past that guide our future. The citadel reminds us that we too might have to make the choice between resigned slavery and the bitter price of freedom. To remove the citadel is to remove a cautionary tale. It is to choke the bard of our story. For when our children ask us, tell us about grandma, tell us about grandpa, I hope we don't get a speech on the bridge, because we know that our words cannot arrest their minds as much as the citadel rocks can callous their feet. Moldovians, if we were considering the project from a position of pain and hardship, I should still suggest we find another path. Even if we are hungry, I suggest we hunger a little bit, if it is for our mothers and fathers. Even if we were destitute, I should suggest more honorable means. But Moldovians, we are rich. We have no need. We have no wants. How dare we trade our heritage for a pay raise? We are already living at the precious time of dual delight. We are a rich nation with a rich heritage. Our citadel gave us our prosperity. How dare our prosperity tempt us to destroy her? Moldovians, my rich, opulent Moldovians, all that I ask is that you continue enjoying this sweet life, the sweet fruit of their misery. All I ask is that you continue in that and that you be far from any thoughts about destroying her. I propose that we should be ready to struggle a little bit, to strive, even to bleed a little, if it is for her. Yes, she stands there crippled in her stretch toward the heavens. Yes, she is broken, but she is our citadel. She's the gift of our mothers and fathers, as glorious as an army with banners. Moldovians, our mothers and fathers sacrificed for us in their misery. How dare we deny them in our prosperity? Thank you.
My colleagues and fellow senators, we have before us a decision not only of fiscal in nature, but also of historic and cultural importance. The prosperity this bridge will bring to our nation and citizens is undeniable. We have been given a responsibility to work on behalf of and in the interest of our citizens, and thus, these evident advantages cannot be lightly dismissed. This is a project that would pay for itself 20 times over and put our nation on the global stage. This is the next step to growth and the flourishing of this country. However, I recognize that for most of us, this is not where the dispute lies. The matter at hand is whether such prosperity ushered in by the building of this bridge is worth blotting out an integral piece of our history. Now, to that end, I would challenge you, as my colleagues Kayla and Sydney have, to consider what was the purpose of the Citadel when it was built, and what is that purpose now? To some, as you have heard from my opponents, it is how we honor those who fought for our independence. To others, it is hallowed ground, a burial site for those who died there. To still others, it is a place of remembrance, so that we do not repeat history. But this citadel, built by the men it seeks to honor, standing as a tombstone over those who died there, as a reminder of the cost of freedom, had a purpose before any of that meaning was placed upon it. It was built as a rampart for the defense of this great nation. It was built in the conquest of peace. It was built by men who wished to see this nation flourish and have the ability to prosper. It was built in the hopes that one day it would no longer be needed. Now we are in that time of peace. We have reached the moment where the citadel, even if it were standing in all of its former glory, is no longer needed. We live in the reality that those veterans fought for. Peace has come, and it has made prosperity possible. This bridge will act as a new monument, representing the peace and amity that our forefathers could only have dreamt of. By replacing the citadel with this bridge, we are not dishonoring those who fought for our independence, but rather recognizing their success, their sacrifice. The citadel was built for a specific task, it has served its purpose, and we are now able to continue its legacy with a new architectural feat. They built the citadel, we build the bridge, but we are both advancing the cause that those men fought for. It is not unfortunate or a shame that there is no other place that this bridge could be built. It is a glory. This bridge will honor those men far more than any dilapidated citadel ever could. What better spot than the place they fought to erect the sign of their success? To those of you who feel this bridge would dishonor the men who fought on that hill, I tell you, they were not fighting for the citadel, they were fighting for the bridge. To those of you who believe that tearing down history, we may forget those men's sacrifice, I tell you, you have already forgotten. They sacrificed so that we could eventually build bridges. We have memorialized the citadel instead of the citadel's purpose. We have sought to honor those men's sacrifice, but lost sight of why they gave their lives. We have grown so intent on defending this hill and its citadel, we have not realized the war is over. As Lewis puts it, we are like the ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We must open our eyes, we must move forward, we must let this bridge carry on the legacy that the citadel's ruins cannot. Now, I would like to address a few of the arguments that the senators have already given today. Dulcie mentioned the citadel is a memorial to those who fought for this land. And fighting for this land is exactly what this bridge is doing. When I ask you to build this bridge, I ask you to do it in the name of fighting in a new way for this land. Blind ambition, she mentioned. I don't ask for blind ambition. I ask for ambition sought with eyes wide open, recognizing where we are today. Maggie claimed that to build this bridge, we're throwing away history in favor of prosperity, but I would argue that it is that very history that was striving for prosperity in the first place. Luke, you pointed out the importance of not turning flags into bathrobes, which I appreciate, and I stand with you. But we need memorials. But who is to say that this bridge cannot have that same meaning of the citadel, that it cannot be a memorial of its own, that it cannot convey that same message? The citadel is crucial to our history because it tells the story of the purpose of our forefathers. That citadel points us to the bridge. So don't keep making mud pies. Thank you.
I stand before you today to advocate the ridiculous position that a citadel nobody lives in is more important than unprecedented economic prosperity. But I do so for the same reason that Golgotha, the Acropolis, and Plymouth Rock are all more important than the apartment complexes that could be built on top of them. Sometimes a pile of stones is better at holding up a national identity than holding up a bridge. As we grapple with this issue, we've heard many guiding principles vying for our attention. But above all economic or diplomatic considerations stands one principle which cannot be sacrificed. That is our national spirit, our love for Meltovia, and the fortitude to fight for her. Our fathers were inspired by this spirit to shed their blood for our liberty, and we are inspired by the same spirit to love our heritage, honor our courageous forefathers, and intentionally cultivate courage in ourselves and in our children. Our national spirit is valuable because material benefits are only as good as the spirit that wields them. We can suffer national disaster, economic slump, or military invasion, but as long as we maintain our national spirit, we will always have a fighting chance. While economic benefit always depends on Turabian reciprocity, our ancient enemies but only recent friends, our national spirit will sustain us regardless of the goodwill of our neighbors. However, it is only ever one generation away from extinction. As Moses instructed the Israelites about their history, only take care and keep your soul diligently, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen. Make them known to your children and your children's children. Thus, every flag we fly, anthem we sing, and festival we celebrate serves as a tangible reminder to our children of the sacrifice of our fathers. Preserving our national spirit requires teaching our children the history it has shaped. Now, how is the citadel relevant to all this? Because physical locations are irreplaceable for teaching children our history. They tie us inviolably to the past. You can read about anything in a book, and then consign that book to the irrelevancy of your bookshelf. But when you realize that you are living on the same land your fathers fought on, you realize that you are irrevocably part of their story. As Joshua commanded the Israelites, recognizing the teaching power of physical monuments, in the future, when your children ask, "What do these stones mean to you?" you are to tell them, "The waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. Therefore, these stones will be a memorial to the Israelites forever." There's even a senator in a distant republic who annually drags his students off to a faraway battlefield named after a white bird. Because if a picture is worth 1,000 words, walking through that picture is worth 1,000,000. How much more ought this citadel to be important to us, the site of the defining moment in our nation's history, when our fathers paid the ultimate price for our ultimate blessing? Meltovians, let us not be tempted by the prospect of prosperity, if it comes at the sacrifice of our soul. Herodotus warned strong nations against grabbing at luxuries and losing their national spirit. Soft places tend to produce soft men, for the same land cannot yield both wonderful crops and men who are noble and courageous in war. While abundance is not always harmful, it is dangerous when we don't have the principles to handle it well. So if we build this bridge and destroy our citadel, we will have managed the difficult task of giving ourselves a temptation for decadence while simultaneously removing the physical reminder for virtue. What if Terabia offered to outright pay for the bridge, just as long as we destroyed all our flags or banned singing the national anthem? We all already recognize that our national spirit is more important than the economic benefits of ignoring it. Let's refer to some of the things that the senators before me have mentioned. I'd just like to clarify regarding Maggie's argument. No one has mentioned it yet. Advocating that we need to update our ferry system is really expostulating on a detail that wasn't given to us. And so while I would love to do that, I unfortunately am stuck to advocate between the bridge and the citadel. Let's talk about Kayla's argument. She argued that this preserves the spirit of our fathers, which is awfully similar to Maggie's argument, who came immediately before me, that it symbolizes our forefathers' sacrifice. My response is they died for independence. They didn't die for economics. Imagine if the people in that nation that we are good friends with, the United States, built a skyscraper on top of Yorktown or on top of the Gettysburg battlefield because our forefathers were dying for the right to erect skyscrapers. That's not why they did it, and if economics is our national identity, that's a really big problem, and all the more reason not to erect a bridge that tramples on one of the last remaining, or one of the most important instantiations of our national spirit. Let's talk about Sydney's argument. She said that we're confusing representation with value. Well, my response is that I agree there's a difference between representation and value. That's exactly what a symbol is. A symbol is a physical representation of a value that needs to be preserved. Let's build an apartment complex on top of Calvary, because Jesus' death was a spiritual reality, and we don't need physical monuments to remember that. I mean, seriously, removing... With all due respect to our opponents, removing symbols prompts the decay of our values. That's why the liberals in this country that we know of, the United States, are all about removing 10 commandments from courthouses, not because they don't like the words in the stone, but because they don't like the value that they represent. This national citadel represents a national spirit that will enable us to persevere through anything far better than if we have a lot of change in our pockets. I'd rather have an empty wallet and a spirit to fight for what's behind me than a full wallet and be a couch potato. This citadel is the way to make sure that we persevere. Thank you.
My dear senators, as we all know, our memorial festival is in 2 weeks. Depending on our decision here today, it might be our final celebration within the walls of the citadel. Will it be the last opportunity we have to fly our flag on its battlements? Will we sing our anthem and touch those stones for one final time? When I first heard of our engineers' plans, I was angry. I thought, like many of my colleagues, that progress would come at the destruction of culture. But when I think of my great-grandmother, I remember the purpose of that citadel. I remember it because when I was frustrated with my piano practice and wanted to give up, she let me take a break in order to tell me a story about the determination of my ancestors in defense of that citadel. And then she taught me how to play the national anthem. When money got tight, she taught my mother to make the smallest things feel like treasures. And when her legs stopped working, she made us wheel her outside to watch the festival parade and took delight in waving at the smiling faces. For her, the victory that brought our independence was not a crumbling monument. It inspired her in the living, breathing moments of life. She didn't want us to remember for the sake of remembering. She wanted us to remember so that we would be inspired to do greater things. My fellow senators have all made valiant arguments, and I do not want to belittle their patriotism in arguing against them. Their motivations should be honored. However, in answering Dulcie, I would question her
insistence that it is the destruction of culture to destruct this holy site, and it makes us a weaker nation. I'd say that culture is the customs, the arts, the social institutions of a particular nation or people. It is not something that is fixed, but that is continually built on. Somebody stuck in the culture of the past is not going to grow a culture of the future. In answering Luke, he said that to destroy this citadel is to be disrespectful. It's like trampling on a grave. Are we trampling on the grave, or are we planting seeds on it? Both require the disturbing of the grave, but one mocks while the other gives life. We are not mocking the citadel and those who died on it by giving it up. We instead are building a new life over that bridge, and so do not take it as merely disrespectful. Caleb used many great illustrations, and yet coming to Greece and the Parthenon and to Athens, it confuses me because our country is not like that. Our country does not depend on the apartment blocks. We're looking at a place that will be able to flourish, and it's not some kind of ambition, as Dulcie talked about. It's looking forward. It's not national security. It will become something that is economically problematic. You talked about how it would be you would rather have no cash in your pocket, and a fighting spirit. But if we're stuck in the past and we don't hand down to our children the memories of these people instead of the physical thing, then we will have no fighting spirit. The importance of the physical stones is really true. God made us physical and spiritual, and we do lose a piece of culture when we lose the citadel. But the purpose of that culture will be lost if you preserve it at the cost of providing for the future. A people stuck in the past will not thrive, and one day they will not be able to survive. If it's the stones that's the problem, move them. The London Bridge is in Arizona. But in all seriousness, it's a loss of the physical representation of culture, and there is a vital importance bound up in the physical representation of something. Building on Sydney's point, at Carleville-sur-Mer in France, there is a memorial that is the final resting place for many of the American soldiers who were killed in the D-Day landings of June 1944. Do we remember those American soldiers because of this memorial, or do we honor the memorial because of those soldiers? Without the memory of our people, our citadel will become irrelevant rubble. We can have progress. We can build the bridge and our nation. It's not about fighting for economics or education. We can pass down to our children the lessons of friendship and unity with other countries instead of being too short-sighted to see that our obsession with our private personal independence will lead to the downfall of our nation. And just because we are prosperous doesn't mean that we shouldn't make our prosperity more. That is not ambition, that is providing for the future. Yes, Maggie, it aches that my son will never see the citadel, but it would be far more painful to raise my son in a country that is held back by refusing to build on its memories and remembers only for remembrance sake. Senators, vote for the building of the bridge. How long are you going to protect it? Until your children chafe under the decisions you've made? Will they blame you for holding back the progress of their country and their livelihoods? Build the bridge now, or we will be having this exact same conversation in 10 years' time, having lost the opportunities that those 10 years would have provided for our children. In some ways, my grandmother was more a guardian of culture, more of a citadel than those stones will ever be. They can't teach you how to play the national anthem. People like her and the memories that they pass on are our true monuments. Build the bridge.
Before I begin, may I ask how much time I have remaining?
A minute 45.
Okay. Members of the Maltovian Senate, specifically Ms. Paul and Mr. Kreft, legacies and histories are not demolished by tearing down the symbols of those legacies and histories. Also, speaking of Mr. Kreft, using Whitebird Canyon as a comparison to the Citadel. Senator, I've been to Whitebird. I've witnessed the beauty of Whitebird. I've done research on its significance. Senator, our Citadel is no Whitebird. Now, Mr. Zazadny, allow me to clear some things up for you since my opening argument apparently confused you. The economical and national conveniences that would come if we carried this bridge project through all the way would greatly outweigh the historical and emotional inconveniences. If I say that despite the fact that even if building the bridge would be one of the most beneficial plans for our nation, and we just don't want to get rid of this worn away structure because there won't be a physical symbol for our regretful conflicts with the Turabians throughout history, then I have just said something about the dignity of our nation. Members of the Maltovian Senate, this bridge project will prove to embody everything that our nation truly stands for: economic prosperity, international peace, and most importantly, the greater good of Maltovia. So we ask that you vote in favor of this bridge project. Let us build that new citadel. Let us actually make our forefathers proud. Our national eudaimonia depends on it. Thank you.
All right, fellow Maltovians, we've got a decision to make. The judges are going to step outside and deliberate for a while, and as we do, you need to determine yourself whether we need to build the bridge or not. And when I come back, I'll ask for a vote. So as we're outside, you can mull over that. We've heard some brilliant speeches, and I will see you again very shortly. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. The judges have conferred, and it's a commonplace to say tough decision, and I'll just dip into that commonplace because I can say, I will not say you're all winners because that's just not true. But I can say that that you represented well. That was, as a collection, a great display of what we want to see. And so I want to thank you all for that. That was very, very good. So I've spent this past year with the freshmen. I know Mr. Pinkall has. And the freshmen are doing good work. I appreciate all you freshmen and what you're doing in rhetoric class. And the freshmen, as they do good work, I think, yeah, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. And now we see what the upperclassmen can do. And you guys brought it. And the freshmen ought to be thinking, oh, one of these days, I hope I can grow up to be like them. I know that's what I'm going to wake up tomorrow thinking. I hope I can grow up to be like our students. So anyway, I could go through a highlight reel. We had some of the speeches were particularly strong thematically, weaving together the arguments in favor and then calling out refutations from the other side. There were some really, really great lines that packaged the argument. Kayla says, do not nullify their achievement for the sake of remembering it. Like, what a great packaging contrast. Caleb had this wonderful balance of the temptation to decadence that we introduce by destroying the citadel. We had the call-outs to Dr. McIntosh, and then the banter about Whitebird was certainly thrilling to me. Sydney began with that personal anecdote that just wove clear through, and the arguments all tied to it. It wasn't a gimmick. It wasn't a clickbait introduction. That's what we look for in an introduction. It's not some sort of, now I've got your attention, I said something snazzy. A good introduction actually is organically ordered to the service of the arguments. And that was certainly true. We certainly saw that in several of the speeches. Kayla's speech was particularly strong in that regard, so was Dulcie's. Anyway, I'm dishing out a lot of compliments here. Let's see. Luke Zazadny had the great punchy trade our heritage for a pay raise, and a number of one-liners like that were strategically inserted. Anyway, very good, very good. But with all of that, There were 3 that stood out and 1 that's the winner, and Mr. Pinkhall's going to tell you that.
Before I announce the winner, we got to vote to build a bridge or not. So if, fellow Meltovians, if you would like to build the bridge, please raise your hands. Wow, I think we got a lot more hands this time. If you don't want to build the bridge, please raise your hand. Okay. All right. I think we're building the bridge. Does it look like?
Well, here's my read on that. I think that this vote was even, but what's unique is about the opening vote was not even. The opening vote was to not build the bridge.
Oh,
So
the opening vote looked similar to me. Well, we can do this.
I think they shifted.
If
I think they shifted.
If you originally voted to build the bridge, and now you have changed your mind to not build the bridge, please raise your hand. All right, so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 10-ish, all right? And if you voted not to build the bridge originally, and now you voted to build the bridge, please raise your hand. 6, 8, okay, okay, good. So we had about 20 there. So this means that the affirmative side, as a whole, won. We're building the bridge. So that's, regardless of if you yourself individually placed today, if you were on the affirmative side, you can take heart. You convinced more people to change their minds than the other side. So well done. But I know you guys are most concerned about the top speeches. So in third place, let's see how much time we got here. I would draw this out more, but unfortunately our time is up. So I've just got to go with announce the winners. In third place, representing Jericho Hall, congratulations, Ms. Kayla Erb. In second place, also representing Jericho Hall, congratulations, Mr. Caleb Kreft. And in first place, for the $200, and I don't know how many Hall points, a lot of Hall points, give it up for Mrs. Sydney Bennett.